Our webinar today is entitled Fundamentals of SAP Recipe Development in PLM 702. This webinar will discuss the latest release of SAP's Recipe Development solution, how it is more flexible than ever, and you will see how you can control many aspects of recipe and label development within the SAP environment. My name is Alan Mendel, Vice President of LeverX, and the moderator for today's webinar. This webinar is being jointly presented with SAP. Before I turn the time over to our presenters, let me briefly introduce you to LeverX. LeverX assists companies increase business value by leveraging existing investments in SAP solutions. LeverX is a SAP Services Partner and Associate Member of the PLM Alliance. LeverX delivers strategic, functional, and technical services in the areas of SAP Product Lifecycle Management, Portfolio and Project Management, and related solutions. LeverX offers services for business and process and strategic consulting, solution architecture development, implementation planning and execution, application management support, on-site and remote delivery models. In addition, LeverX provides services for SAP Mobile Application Strategy Development and Implementation, as well as a broad set of SAP technologies including SAP NetWeaver, Workflow, Business Warehouse, and Business Object. We are pleased to introduce our presenters for today's webinar. First, we'll hear from Dan Bender, Solution Management, SAP Recipe Development from SAP. We will then be pleased to hear from Anil Kakade, Senior Principal Consultant at LeverX, and a demonstration from Hector Velasco, Senior Principal Consultant from LeverX. Our webinar agenda will proceed as outlined. We'll first have an overview of recipe development from Dan Bender. We'll follow up with a demonstration and a discussion of SAP Recipe Development from Anil and Hector, including a discussion with regards to implementing recipe development. So with that, let me turn our presentation over to Dan.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Alan, for the introduction. As Alan mentioned, my name is Dan Bender. I work for SAP in the solution management space, specifically as it relates to PLM solutions to support process industries. So I've been working with recipe development for the last 4 to 5 years, and I'm going to give you a very brief overview that gives you some insight, and then we'll allow Anil and Hector an opportunity to present a little bit more detail in terms of their exposure and experiences with the tool set. So moving right forward, the very first section here just kind of talks a little bit about some of the key things that have kind of shaped our approach to the development of this solution. It really falls into 3 fundamental categories. One is that customers in the process industries are dealing with compliance and regulatory impact in an ever more increasing fashion. While these industries have always been affected by regulatory compliance, we are living in a greener world, and the expectation is that your products comply to that environment. And it doesn't really matter if it's a food or a chemical or a life sciences solution. You need to deal with this on a constant basis. And this becomes a very expensive and very time-consuming application space. So trying to include this as more of the development process is effective. Let's use a very simple example of if I'm designing a specific product that I plan to sell in for, let's say, France, for example. It would be a good idea before I get to the commercialization stage that I validated that it's available for sale, that I haven't gone against any restrictions that are specific to that particular regional space. The second major challenge is globalization. And this is looking at it from multiple different ways. It's a term to try to explain multiple concepts, but there's a design anywhere, build anywhere concept that's becoming very prevalent in the process industry, especially in the world of chemical and CPG, where you see a lot of acquisition take place. Why not leverage the best of the best within your organization as opposed to always having regional expertise? This is going to require kind of a traditional look at PLM in that having that single source of the truth. You know, one way of doing things, one set of information, one record. The second side of it is from a globalization perspective, I need to have that single set of information available for consumption and analytics. So if I look at some of the customers in the SAP area, you know, they're doing a number of initiatives. Let's say you're in the food industry and you want to reduce the fat content of your products, globally by 5% over the course of the next 3 years. How do you effectively measure that so that you can report on that consumer? And the last component to the globalization component is really the consumer needs in this space. Consumers are becoming much more, let's say, educated in terms of understanding what's in their product space. Having that exposure and that ability to manage and meet these consumer needs is going to require a solid product data record, because they're expecting that they can go onto your website or they can go into your product information records and validate what type of compositional information you're using, whether it's a nutritional thing in a food product or a compositional or physical property in a chemical product. The point is that you need to be able to manage this data set effectively. The last point is complexity. It's kind of like take the last few slides and add it all together. The process of doing development is just that much more complex than it ever has been. It gets to a position where you need to present information effectively and efficiently. You need to be able to manage this across a very broad set of requirements. So how do you work in this highly regulated environment? How do you work with all these various data points? And how do you do this in a way that not only drives downstream efficiency, so the use of the information from manufacturing or supply chain or whatnot, but also how do you make the process of product development more efficient? Traditionally in the PLM world, we've had a little bit of a focus on the downstream. How does everybody else need to work with the data record? And while that's extremely important, there's also the upstream side, meaning how do I make that formulator's job or that recipe developer's job that much more efficient, that much more effective?